Life Stories brings you a journey of resilience, love, and the unexpected twists life throws at us. Today's story follows Emma, a young woman who was disowned by her family after choosing to raise her child alone. Faced with rejection, she not only built a life for herself but also found strength in the most unexpected way. Through hardship and triumph, Emma discovers the true meaning of family, love, and forgiveness. Join us as we dive into her inspiring journey. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to start today's story. It was raining the day my parents disowned me. Not the gentle kind of rain that makes everything feel fresh and clean, but the kind that soaks through your clothes and chills you to the bone. It was the sort of rain that made everything seem dreary and heavy. Looking back, I can't help but think that the weather was fitting for what was about to happen. I had always thought I had my life figured out. At 22, I was on the cusp of completing medical school, with a clear vision of my future. I had big dreams of becoming a doctor, making my family proud, and succeeding in the way they had always wanted me to. But life, it seems, had other plans. And it wasn't just life, there was one decision, one choice, that would change everything for me. And it was a decision I couldn't take back. It was early morning, and I was sitting at the kitchen table with my parents. The atmosphere was thick with the smell of coffee, a smell I usually loved. But today it made my stomach churn. The pregnancy test lay between us on the kitchen counter, a silent bomb ticking away, its results already known but unspoken. My mother's voice cracked as she asked, "You're keeping it, Emma?" I could feel my heartbeat thudding in my ears as I nodded. I had never been good at holding back tears. But somehow, this time, I held them in, my hand instinctively pressed against my still flat stomach, the small life inside me seeming to stir in response. "I'm keeping it, Mom. I've made my decision." My father slammed his coffee mug down so hard that it rattled the table. "What about medical school?" he demanded. "What about your future? This will ruin everything." "I can do both," I said, trying to steady my voice, my hand still resting protectively over my stomach. "Other women manage it. I can make it work." The words felt weak, even to me. I was trying to convince not only them but myself as well. I knew what they expected, what they wanted for me. And this pregnancy, didn't fit into that plan. "You can't do both, Emma," my father said, pacing back and forth like a caged animal. "Other women have husbands. You don't even know who the father is. This is reckless, irresponsible." I bristled at his words. Though I knew I couldn't change his mind, I wasn't prepared for what came next. I wasn't ready for the words my mother would speak, the ones that would hit me harder than anything I could have imagined. She laughed, but it was a hollow sound, empty of warmth. "Of course he won't be in the picture," she said, her eyes full of something I couldn't place. "Because you won't even tell us who he is. For all we know, you don't even know." My voice rose, sharp and defensive. "Don't finish that sentence, Mom, please. This isn't how we raised you," my father said, his voice trembling with anger. "We didn't come to this country, sacrifice everything, just so you could throw it all away like this." The silence that followed was deafening. I watched their faces, the faces I had loved my whole life, transform before my eyes. They were no longer filled with pride, no longer filled with warmth. They were filled with disappointment, disgust. They were wearing masks I couldn't recognize. "I'm not throwing anything away," I said quietly, though I knew the words held little weight. "I can still be a doctor. I can make this work." "No, you can't," my mother interrupted, her voice cold. "Not like this, not alone." And that was when I knew it was over. Their voices became muffled, and everything around me seemed to blur. I didn't hear the words they spoke next, but I saw their faces, cold and unyielding. My father's final words rang out, "Then you leave us no choice." The decision had been made. They wouldn't support me anymore. They would cut me off. And I would have to leave. "Are you throwing me out?" I asked, the words barely making it past my lips. They felt foreign, as if I wasn't even the one speaking. "No," my father corrected, his voice low. "You're choosing to leave. You're choosing this mistake over your family." That was the moment everything changed. It wasn't just a simple rejection of my choice, it was the complete rejection of who I was. of everything I had hoped for and everything they had promised. They weren't just rejecting my pregnancy, they were rejecting me. The person I had become. I remember every detail of that day. The way the rain drummed relentlessly against the windows. The smell of my father's coffee going cold. And the sound of my footsteps on the stairs as I packed my few belongings. It was the beginning of a new life for me. One I hadn't asked for but was forced to face. I thought about the weight of the words my father had spoken. The finality in his voice. But more than that, I thought about the child inside me. About what kind of world I was bringing them into. I didn't know what the future held. But I knew I couldn't turn back. That first night, I found refuge with Rachel. A friend who had been there for me even when others had turned their backs. She was a single mother herself. Struggling, but surviving. And somehow, we both made it through. The first night I spent at Rachel's place was a blur of emotions. I cried myself to sleep. But not because I felt sorry for myself. I cried because I was so overwhelmed by the weight of what I had just lost. The family that I had always thought would be there for me. The security I once took for granted. But more than anything, I cried because I was terrified of what lay ahead. I was about to embark on a journey I hadn't planned for. And I had no idea how to make it work. Rachel, despite her own struggles, was a beacon of strength. She welcomed me with open arms. As if she had always known I would end up needing her. Her apartment was modest. A small 2-bedroom place that barely had enough room for her and her son. But she made it work. And somehow, she made me feel like I could too. "You'll be fine, Emma," Rachel said, pulling me into a tight hug that night. "You'll figure this out. I know you will. You've always been strong. You just have to believe it." Her words, though comforting, didn't fully sink in at the time. The uncertainty weighed heavily on me. I wasn't just worried about myself anymore. I was worried about the baby inside me. And I didn't even know how I was going to support myself. Let alone this new life. But Rachel's belief in me, her unwavering support, gave me the strength to get out of bed the next morning and keep moving forward. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. I managed to finish medical school. Though it wasn't easy, there were nights I stayed up until 3 a.m. Books and notes scattered all over the small kitchen table. Trying to study while Rachel's son played in the living room or slept in his crib. I worked part-time jobs. Everything from bartending to tutoring. Just to keep the bills paid. It was exhausting, and there were times I wanted to give up. But then there was Walker, the little life inside me that kept me going. I hadn't told Rachel about the father's absence. I didn't need to. She knew the situation and never once made me feel like I was alone. But there were nights when I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I had made the right decision. Was it worth it? Was I doing the right thing? But the moment I held my son in my arms, everything changed. He was perfect, small and red-faced. But perfect. I named him Ethan, a name that symbolized strength and new beginnings. I sent my parents pictures of him, trying to reach out, hoping they would finally accept him. But I never heard back. The pictures remained unopened. The birthday cards and Christmas cards went unanswered. And I couldn't shake the feeling of rejection. I finished medical school, not the way I planned. But I finished it. I graduated, and I stood in that ceremony, feeling a sense of pride that was both bitter and sweet. I had done it without their help, without their support, but it didn't feel the same without them there to share the moment. The journey wasn't easy, and there were times when I thought I might break. But I didn't. I made it through. And as I held my son, as I watched him grow, I realized that I didn't need my parents' approval. I had already created a family of my own choosing, one that loved me for who I was, not for who they wanted me to be. There was one night, a few months after Ethan was born, when I stumbled upon an old lottery ticket in my coat pocket. It had been buried there for months, forgotten in the chaos of everything. I almost threw it away. But something made me pause. I looked down at the crumpled ticket, then at Ethan, asleep in his crib, and thought, why not check? What's the worst that could happen? I had no idea that this simple decision would change everything. It's strange how life can turn on a dime. One moment, you're struggling to make ends meet, trying to juggle school, work, and a newborn, and the next, The world as you know it changes forever. I remember the moment I checked the lottery ticket as if it were yesterday. I had just tucked Ethan into bed and was sitting on the couch. Exhausted, yet somehow wired from the day. I glanced at the ticket again. That tiny piece of paper that had sat forgotten in my coat pocket for months. I opened my phone, scrolling through the lottery website. The numbers flashing on the screen. My fingers trembled as I compared the ticket to the numbers on my phone. One by one, they matched. It couldn't be real. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, and stared at the screen once more. The numbers were still there. Still the same. $47 million. I dropped the ticket. My heart was pounding in my chest. And I could barely breathe. Was this really happening? Was it a mistake? Mom? Ethan's small voice called from the other room. He must have heard something in my voice because he came running. His little feet pattering down the hallway. I could barely move, could barely think. I was in shock. Mom, why are you staring at your phone like that? Ethan asked, his innocent eyes wide with concern. Go get Aunt Rachel from next door. Sweetie, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He didn't question me. He ran, his excitement palpable, probably thinking I had seen something amazing on the screen. In that moment, I couldn't even speak. I just sat there, staring at the phone, the ticket, the numbers, wondering if this was a dream. A few minutes later, Rachel burst through the door, still in her nursing scrubs, looking frazzled from her shift at the hospital. Emma, what's wrong? She asked. Seeing my pale face, wordlessly, I handed her the phone and the ticket. She looked at them, back and forth, her eyes widening with each glance. Holy, she whispered, but quickly clamped her hand over her mouth, looking down at Ethan who was now standing beside me, oblivious to the weight of what was happening. Is this real? I don't know, I said, my voice trembling. I can't think straight. She read the numbers out loud, still in disbelief. 47 million, after taxes. Emma, you're still looking at over 20 million. I couldn't process it. I couldn't understand how something like this could happen to me, of all people. After everything I had been through, after all the rejection, the hardship, the loneliness, this windfall felt surreal. Ethan tugged at my sleeve, breaking my thoughts. Are we rich now, Mommy? I hugged him tightly, my hands shaking. I don't know, sweetie. We need to make sure this is real first. In the hours that followed, everything felt like a blur. The lottery office confirmed it. The ticket was valid. Yes, I had won. And suddenly, I was thrust into a world I had never prepared for. I was connected to a financial advisor, Alec, who spoke in calm, measured tones, guiding me through the process. The first thing you need to do, Alec told me during our meeting, is tell absolutely no one. Not your colleagues, not your neighbors, no one, except those who already know. I thought about my parents, the estranged family that had cut me off all those years ago. I couldn't even begin to imagine how they would react. But I knew one thing for certain. They wouldn't have a clue about how to deal with this. They would expect something from me, demand something, and I wasn't sure I was ready to face that. What about my family? I asked him bitterly, knowing the answer before it even left my lips. Alec's tone softened. That might change once the news gets out. Money has a way of bringing people out of the woodwork. He wasn't wrong. The very next day, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. My stomach sank when I saw it was my mother. I hadn't heard from her in 8 years. Not a word. Emma, sweetheart, her voice trembled through the phone. Unfamiliar, strange, as if she were speaking to a stranger. We saw you on the news. We've been thinking about you, about Ethan. We miss you both so much. 8 years, 8 long years of silence, of rejection. And now, she missed us. I could feel the weight of her words pressing against my chest. As I hung up the phone, the words my mother had spoken echoed in my mind. After 8 years of silence, now they wanted to make amends. Now they wanted to be a part of my life again. But I had changed. I had learned that love wasn't conditional. And forgiveness wasn't something to be bought with money or false promises. I looked at Ethan, his innocent eyes filled with trust and love. He had never known his grandparents. Never had the chance to experience the family I once thought I would have. But what I realized in that moment was that we had something far better. We had built our own family. One founded on love, support, and understanding. The days ahead were filled with decisions. But one thing was certain, I wasn't going to let my past define me. Nor would I let my parents' manipulation or the promises of money change the course of my life. I had found strength in myself. And in the people who had supported me. Like Rachel and the community I had helped build. That was what truly mattered. My foundation was taking off. And with the help of others, I was able to use my newfound wealth for something meaningful, helping single parents. Just like me, who had been shunned or judged. I wasn't just turning pain into purpose. I was creating a future for myself and for others. One where love and acceptance were at the core of everything. This was my legacy, not the money. Not the bitterness. But the people I had helped. And the family I had created. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more inspiring life stories.